Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Jim Lee's WildCATs number 4. This is the conclusion of what was supposed to have been a 3-issue miniseries, but it went to a 4th issue. And great cover here by Jim Lee and Scott Williams featuring Zealot, Warblade and Spartan, 3 of the most popular of the WildCATs to this point. So let's open this one up to the first page. And first of all, there's a little bit of a message here from Jim Lee, and it's not regarding WildCATs, but rather Whilce Portacio and Wetworks, where he explains that Whilce Portacio's little sister was very sick and that she died recently, and therefore Wetworks is going to be indefinitely postponed and won't be resolicited until all 3 issues are fully penciled and ready to go to the printers. So that's pretty sad there. But here we do have the conclusion of Jim Lee's own WildCATs miniseries. The creators are Brandon Choi, Jim Lee, co-creator story, Jim Lee pencils, Scott Williams inks, Joe Chiodo colors, and Mike Heisler letters. So at the end of the previous issue, it seemed like Helspont was victorious, that he had taken control of the orb and used its energies to open a stargate to Daemon, his home planet, and that a flotilla of Daemonites were coming to Earth to conquer the planet and kill all the cherubim on Earth. So here he is, pretty cock-a-hoop about that. Victory is mine, reunification begins now, he says, and the title of the story is Resolution. So this is quite an action-packed issue, really. We've got 3 long horizontal panels here running across both pages. It looks like the WildCATs are down and out, except for Voodoo here and Youngblood, and Dan Quayle in the previous issue was exorcised by Voodoo of the Daemon, Belial, who was possessing him. So he's back to normal now, and this is a pretty cool shot of Youngblood about to leap into action along with Voodoo and Maul. So Voodoo discovers that she isn't able to use her powers on Helspont, even though he's possessing an Acuran alien. And he explains, half-breed witch, while you may have exorcised Belial, your powers are useless against one whose host is not human. So he's able to resist all the attacks there. Pretty cool art, as I said, from Jim Lee and team. And here we've got Helspont now attacking Youngblood and Maul and Voodoo. Pretty nice work there by Jim Lee. And here he is recapping in terms of what's gone on, that this flotilla of Daemonites are about to arrive to Earth. And then we switch scenes to Grifter, Marlowe and Void. And Marlowe says he's got one last ace up his sleeve, so he contacts Spartan, who is pretty much defunct, but he's got just enough energy that he can reroute it to his vital systems, and he uses his onboard scanners to search for any inherent flaw or weakness in the facility that may give the WildCATs an advantage. He finds one, but knows it will be enough. So basically what he does is he pulls this switch and loses his own life, but sacrifices himself in order to thwart Helspont here. So Helspont is pretty ticked off. He says aloud, like a proper Silver Age villain, that he has to hurry and reactivate the control system to maintain the Stargate. This is a great anchor image here of Warblade leaping into action in order to delay Helspont on Marlowe's orders. Very nice work by Jim Lee here. And another great action shot of him lashing out and slashing at Helspont. But Helspont is match enough for him and blasts him away, even without access to the orb. He says that Warblade is no match for his own native powers. But then it turns out that Marlowe has sabotaged, while Warblade was keeping Helspont busy, he sabotaged the backup systems. So Helspont is pretty annoyed about that, and he makes his way all the way down into the reactor core to get the orb, with which he promises he'll destroy the WildCATs. So he burns his way through the facility en route to the orb, and then Void transports the team down to the reactor core in order to tackle Helspont for one last time. And he says, all your efforts are for naught, Marlowe, for once I open this reactor casing, I still have, but it turns out nothing, the orb is gone. So, who could have taken the orb, eh? Well, it turns out to be this character, the gnome, and this was all foreshadowed in issue number 1, if you check out the video on that. So, he's got the orb courtesy of his triad, who acquired it for him, and Helspont asks for it. Of course, the gnome refuses and uses the orb to blast Helspont here. So, again, pretty action-packed. I like this layout here by Jim Lee. It's pretty inventive with the gnome in the middle of the page and just 4 panels around with these different action sequences. So we see Marlowe's surprised at Helspont having been taken out. The WildCATs go into action against the Triad, and Gnome's personal bodyguard, the Coda sister here, Zealot, going up against her. Then we've got the Triad going up against Grifter and Voodoo. So a pretty cool action sequence here. This is, you can't ignore this house ad for Cyberforce issue number 3 featuring Pitt. I did pick that one up on the strength of this ad. And then back to the story. So the gnome makes his escape. The dialogue here is just, I have to be honest, I don't like being negatively critical, but I just have to be. The dialogue is really, really poor. I was thinking about it. It's very much like a cliched Saturday morning children's cartoon level of villains dialogue. Even Skeletor has better dialogue than these guys. So Brandon Choi really not up to writing any kind of interesting dialogue at all. But the story moves along at a fair old clip. As I said, lots of action in this final issue of the opening story on the title. So he uses the orb to blast Zealot because he discerns that there is a connection between Zealot and the orb. He says here, I know your secret, you and the orb are one. So he attacks her. Marlowe gets a drop on him with his gun there. And he says, hey, have you so quickly forgotten our bargain, Marlowe? I shall call in my favor now. Heroes do keep their word, yes. So that's a reference to the bargain they made back in issue number 2. So he's attacking Void there, but Marlowe says, I told you to drop it, and he shoots his arm off, his forearm off, which is pretty cool. I like the sequence where it drops over the edge of this platform, and the gnome dives over the edge after the orb. So that's some pretty crazy stuff. And then Marlowe says here, whoever said I was a hero? Okay, that's not a bad moment from Brandon Choi. So then Void is in trouble here, and she doesn't have enough power to port them away before the reactor core explodes. But Jacob here realizes that, well, first of all, Youngblood flee, as do the Triad and Pike and the Coda, so everybody escapes. I really like this way that Jim Lee would draw characters kind of silhouetted out, but with certain features of their costume still showing. That's a very effective shot there of Youngblood escaping the facility just before it completely blows up. And then we've got Marlowe and Void here on the platform with the reactor core about to explode, and Marlowe says, it can't end like this, I won't let it. And he says, take my hand out, Adriana. If I'm who you say, then I've got the power to help you, but I'll need your help if we're all going to make it out. So she says she'll try, and then great one-page explosion here. The facility goes up in flames, and we've got Youngblood have just escaped. We've got Bedrock here protecting the Vice President. Very cool artwork here. Jim Lee always great at drawing explosions. That's really nicely done. And then we have the aftermath as the dust settles. Who's to be found in the wreckage, only the remains of a Spartan. And so they recognize that he's not, fully human, but a cyborg, as Shaft says. And they figure out that that Spartan saved them all, deactivating the reactor relay switch, cutting Helspont off from the orb. So the feedback fried his systems. The man sacrificed himself to save us, says Shaft. And I think Bedrock asks, do you think the others made it out? And Shaft says here at the end, they seemed a resourceful bunch, Bedrock. I wouldn't be surprised if our paths crossed again. And indeed they do. That's a really nice, I like the artwork here on this page, and in particular this final panel. Again, that trick of Jim Lee's like silhouetting out most of the figures, but leaving in details of their costume to identify them, and Shaft's hair there, of course. And I just like this last look at Spartan's deactivated body and just the red eyes there, the little pinpricks for the eyes, just like a Terminator. Pretty cool stuff. And then, well, of course, it turns out if there was no bodies, the WildCATs survived. So they're there celebrating their survival and their success in managing to thwart Helspont and ensure that Stargate didn't open properly. So Voodoo here is pretty sad. Why is that? It's because she's mourning the loss of Spartan and the fact that nobody seems to care. But Marlowe has got a surprise up his sleeve. So he says, come on, seeing is believing. And it turns out that there's another body for Spartan's mind to inhabit. So he says here, he can't really die like the rest of us. He's a cybersynthetic being. Same mind, just different bodies. In fact, all his memories are being downloaded into this new body while he's in this rest cycle. A couple of hours and he'll be his old self. So Voodoo's pretty glad about that. And of course, that's because she fancies Spartan. And then we've got Marlowe kicking back, having a beer and some peanuts here. And he has a little chat with Void, who's pretty quiet, as he says, and she says, I was just thinking about my dreams, Jacob, which we saw in the first and second issues. I died in my first battle with the gnome, but as my consciousness was shattered into oblivion, a splinter of it came back in time to influence the past and to cause me to seek your help in the impending confrontation. It was your intervention that made the difference. So he says, so you got it right this time, nothing wrong with that. But she makes the point here, and I really like this image, this kind of leaving the rest of Void's face blank for the colorist, and just these parallel lines here. It's interesting effect. It is just that now the future is so unclear. I'm not sure what tomorrow will bring. So Marlowe concludes, welcome back to the human race, Adriana. As long as the sun shines and the wind blows, there'll always be tomorrow, and it'll be up to people like us to make sure it's always a better one than the one before. And off they fly in their ship. And that's not the end of it, because there's an epilogue, and I really like the art on this epilogue page, like this establishing shot here of Manhattan, and we've got a newsboy selling papers, the National Eye, it seems here, and this trench-coated figure asks for a copy. It's a book 50, and there's the headline, Quail Possessed by Extraterrestrial, VP and Alien. And Lynch says, well, I'll be damned, because it is Lynch. You were right, Marlowe. I would have locked you up if you told me. So that's a reference back to issue number 2. And then the kid with his Image t-shirt, Quail and Alien, extra, read all about it. So a few little details here. This guy wearing a Spawn t-shirt, and then here on the back of the newspaper, Image Comics expands, Kirby's coming. So they'd worked out a deal with Jack Kirby to do something for Image, but unfortunately a little bit late, because Kirby died in 1994. So there really wasn't much of Kirby done at Image because of that, but I guess nobody was expecting that really. So there you go. That is the conclusion of what was to have been a 3-part miniseries, went to 4 parts. The art in the first issue, not too bad. In the second issue, only okay. Third and fourth issues, really Jim Lee stepped up a gear and produced some excellent work, particularly in this issue as well. And I like the last few pages too. I'd say he was relieved to get to the end of this story finally. And then there was a preview of Larry Stroman's Tribe. So there's a 4-page preview here. I never really figured out what Tribe was about terribly much. The art looks nice, of course. So I'll just show you that. But kind of confusing stuff. And I think that that's most people's opinions about Tribe, that it doesn't really add up to anything that makes a hell of a lot of sense. So there's a letters page here at the end. And then this was interesting. There's an ad for Cybernary, featured in Deathblow #1, and this image here by Jim Lee, and that looks pretty cool. So obviously enjoying himself drawing that. I would have liked it blown up for the entirety of the page, but it looks cool nonetheless. So I do hope that you enjoyed this quick review and commentary on WildCATs #4. If you did, please like the video on YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.